Why is body language so important?
Because if we miss the clues that people give us, we don't communicate as well as we could do. So body language is often the outward display of what's going on inside. So understanding that helps us be more compassionate, more empathetic, and more human and more relatable.
So it's like a physical Instagram profile of essentially who you are. Um, Say if I were to enter a room and I'm not exactly sure what to do, but I want to present myself as a confident person.
Yep.
What are the things that I should do to ensure I feel that way?
There's two answers to this, Vansh. That I could just give you a list of things, which I will do shortly. But the most important thing to do is to actually feel confident inside authentically, because that does show through the best. Some of the things you can do to help yourself fake it until you make it is to slow down your walk, make eye contact around the room, don't be looking at your phone. If you do feel really nervous and you're walking into a room and you don't know anybody in that room, for example, it's a meeting or a networking event or some sort of social interaction, head for a drink station or the bar, so you give yourself a purpose. So know that before you go in, I'm going to go and look for where I'm going to sit, or I'm going to know where I'm going to go and look for a drinks area to make myself a cup of coffee. And doing that takes away some of the nerves. Whereas if you just walk into a room and think, I don't know what I'm going to do, you come across as less than confident. So there are some of the things you can do to help yourself.
Okay. So essentially assigning yourself a purpose when you walk into a room can make you come across as if you know what you're doing by being there.
Yeah.
Okay. Say in that room, I wanted to start a conversation with someone, and I got in the conversation with that person. They were speaking to me about something that they were interested in. What are some things that I should do during conversation with my hands or with my eyes to ensure that they know I'm interested in the conversation?
Okay, so we always trust people more when we see their hands. So best not to hide them in pockets or fold them under your arms. Keep them loose and visible. So one of the things you can do is when they're talking, just go, like the head nods. Not too much though, because if we head nod too much, it can come across as insincere actually. So just the odd one, like, that's interesting, or those head tilt to the side, that shows interest. Not too far though, because then that can be like, really? So those are a couple of things. And sometimes when they're speaking, you can just say something like, just so I got this right, you are saying da-da-da, and repeat their words back to them. That works really well because people feel really listened to then. And what they often then do is go on to embellish what they've just said. So they give you more information. So that's another good thing to do.
That's interesting, because I've read a few books on communication, and I've done my fair search of how to do okay in conversations.
Yeah.
And one of the things that it comes across even in conversations when you're in relationships trying to solve problems or disagreements with people, it's just repeating what they've said, I guess, makes them feel heard and understood. And if you say something wrong, they can just correct you because you understood it.
You're getting more information. The more information we have, the better.
Okay. So when I am speaking to someone, then instead of listening, playing the reverse out, what are some things I should do to be more intriguing or charismatic?
Eye contact is always a good one. So you're the speaker now. Is that what you're saying? You're the speaker?
Yes.
So giving someone eye contact, but not too intense. 60 to 70% of the conversation should be good eye contact, but looking away as well, so that they don't feel like they're being, skewered with your eyes. That works really well. And checking for those cues to make sure they're following along, and noticing perhaps if that suddenly happens, there could potentially be something they haven't understood. So I wouldn't say to someone, "Oh, you didn't get that, did you?" What I'd say is, "Let me tell you a bit more about that, because I think that you might be interested in this," and give them more information, because you've just seen from this that they perhaps don't understand what you're talking about. So don't pull them up on it, but give them more information.
Has there ever been a time where someone's been speaking or you've been speaking and you've noticed that someone's misunderstood it through those social cues and it's helped you out? If there is a story, I would love to hear it.
Massively. I can tell you a story about where I saw something else, and I was pitching to a potential client. It was a very large global bank, and I was pitched to do some training for the team, 90 of their team. And as I was running through the topics of the suggestions based on the written brief in person, when I mentioned certain topics, the potential client just did this.
Hmm.
And I know that when someone does that, it means they don't like that, or it's a little bit of a sign of rejection. So instead of saying, well, I can see you don't like that topic, let me swap it to another topic, I just said, instead of me talking about this, would this alternative be more useful for the teams? And I did that the whole way through the topics. So we got to the end of the conversation and I said, how does this training look? She went, that is exactly what I wanted for the teams. Because I'd read her face. She did ask me in the next meeting, I did get the job, by the way. She did ask me in the next meeting, she said, did you read my body language? And I was, yes, of course I did. Because, as long as it's within my area of expertise, I don't mind what I talk about. And I want you to be happy. I want you to be, getting the training you want for your teams, which we did very successfully because I read her body language.
That's amazing. It just emphasizes the importance that body language has, and which is exactly why we're having this conversation to, well, make sure other people know, because there's a lot of times, I guess, where we'll get into social situations and out of just subconscious ways to deal with the situation that's in front of us, we'll do certain things. One thing that I remember reading, you mentioned crossing arms a bit early in the conversation.
Yeah.
I remember reading someone talking about how having like a winner sort of body language is usually the preferred, and what they noticed was like in loser body language, people tend to be more crouched over, crossed arms, and that's the typical social language that we have.
Yeah.
But having more winner body language tends to exude more confidence and more charisma, I guess.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things there. There's a myth about crossing arms that it means you're defensive. It's not true. Only in some situations. On the whole, I often sit like this with my arms crossed. Even I sit at my desk like this sometimes because it's comfortable. I also cross my arms when I'm cold or I'm feeling vulnerable in some way. I might, do this, some sort of self-soothing. So one size doesn't fit all when it comes to body language. There's often nuances of context which can change how we read it. And the other thing about you said about the winner body language and the loser body language, it's spot on. Someone who is dejected, slumping, that's not the body language of a winner. But someone who's upright, shoulders back, taking up space, that's the body language of a winner.
Okay, interesting.
And you can trick your mind into, when you change your physiology, you can trick your mind and nervous system into mentally changing your mind, if that makes sense. So if you are feeling dejected and sorry for yourself and miserable, but then you change that body language to be upright, to be more expansive, a smile on your face, even if you don't feel like smiling, that will change. Changing your physiology will change how you internally feel, and you won't feel as miserable as you did when your body language.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
That is very interesting, because I actually didn't know that. The only sort of relation that I've had to that sort of thing was how music affects the way that our mind works. Like if you listen to a happy song when you're feeling dejected, it can help you put yourself in a happy mood. But that is incredibly interesting. If I put myself into a winner sort of body language to exude more confidence, I will become subconsciously happier.
Yes.
Very, very interesting.
Yeah. And if you are really happy and you're feeling really confident, and then you try and put on the miserableness, you'll see the difference. Try it both ways. Try feeling miserable, and you genuinely are miserable, then putting on the winner body language. That will change your state. But also do it the opposite way around. When you're feeling really great and then try to be miserable, it's really hard to do because your mind doesn't want to do that. So you can trick your mind into state change.
That's something new. You learn something new, don't you? That is something I'll probably be taking into account, because I can imagine there's lots of times where people feel fairly dejected. Maybe they had a bad day, or most of the time they've had a bad moment, and it makes them feel fairly terrible the rest of the day. But going for a walk, being upright, pretty confident about it, and having some sort of confidence in yourself can help you
massively,
I guess, bring that back. Talking about body language, I mean, one of the main things I guess people struggle with is figuring out body language when they go on dates. So what are the do's and don'ts when we were to go on a date? So say for the girl side or the guy side.
So confidence is very attractive unless it becomes overconfident. So if you are feeling nervous, which is quite normal to do on a date, is to say to your date, and this is male or female, I'm feeling a bit nervous about this, because what will happen is your brain will then relax and goes, okay, my mission is accomplished. I've told them I'm nervous. I can relax now. But if someone is shifty, so not good with eye contact, if you aren't good with eye contact and that's natural for you, it's best to say up front, my eye contact's not great. I know that it's something I'm working on. I feel really uncomfortable, but please don't think I'm not interested. Because when people don't give us good eye contact, we often read it as though they don't care, they're not interested in me. So if it is something you struggle with, be upfront about it and say, so that it isn't misread as lack of interest signs.
Okay.
One of the facial expressions I always say to look for in a dating scenario is this one.
Okay.
So that's the half smile. Did you see that half smile? Yours again.
Right, I see.
And it's only on that side of my face. This side of my face, nothing happens. That is what we call the contempt smile or the superior smirk. So when someone does that, they're basically saying, I'm better than you. I'm superior to you. I have no respect for you. So, I mean, if you like a bad boy or a bad girl and you see that kind of fits, because they are going to be on the lookout for somebody else potentially who is more their level. And often with that comes behavior that we don't always want in a relationship. So I will say watch out for that one. If you don't want to be messed about or any bad behavior, then if someone's showing that high level of that half smile, if they're talking about an award they've just won at work, that's fine.
Yeah.
But if it's just in general and it's a lot, it's often a really big red flag.
Okay. What about signs that show that they are interested in you?
So leaning in, so leaning forward, light touches on the arm maybe, or letting hands touch. You both reach for a salt pop or a napkin or something together. That's often a sign. Body language that mirrors each other naturally. I'm not talking about putting on the same body language as somebody else. I don't think that should ever be done. I think that always looks odd and inauthentic. But if it just happens, you just notice that all of a sudden that you're both sat the same way, that's a really good sign that you're both on the same wavelength at that point. Oftentimes, women do this more than men, but men do it as well, where they do a look away and look back again quick. That's often a sign of interest.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. About the mirroring body language, I feel like that's something that we tend to do a lot more often than we think in social situations.
Yeah.
How can that be a bad thing? But how can that also be a thing that we can use to our advantage?
I mean, it's a bad thing when someone does it on purpose. So if you were sat like this and I did the same as you, but I did it on purpose, I think that's a bad thing, because if you pick up the fact that I'm doing that, you are going to instantly think, why is she trying to create that situation and you're going to trust me less. Whereas if you sat like that and then I did it, but I'm not doing it on purpose, it just happens, and then we both notice, that's a good thing, because then it shows we're on the same wavelength. And it's just something we do as humans. We do mimic other people when we like them and we're on the same wavelength. I just think it's a bad thing if you do it on purpose to try and get them to like you more.
Okay. I mean, it's an interesting thing that you say that we mimic other people when we like them, because there's this one quote that I remember hearing that went something along the lines as, our hearts are a museum of everyone that we've loved. So it's like when you remember the time that you said a joke that you remember an old friend saying, or you do something you remember an old partner doing, it's because our hearts are a museum of everyone we love. And it kind of makes sense in the mimicking thing, where it's like anyone that we like spending time around, we'll take certain character traits off them. That's why you find two partners who end up spending a lot of time together end up speaking the same sort of mannerisms.
Absolutely, yeah.
Whenever they're with each other, which is very interesting to see. Do you know why humans are like that? Because we do that, but I'm just curious if you.
We relate to things that we like. We move towards, as humans, we move towards pleasure and we move away from pain on the whole. But we move towards things that we like. And if we like, often you'll see people dress very similarly because they want to show that bond. And a lot of the times they're doing it unconsciously. I know times when me and my husband have turned up and I've got a white blouse and jeans on and he's got a white shirt and jeans on. I'm like, and neither of us have done it on purpose because we don't want to go out twinning. We are not that couple. But we have similar likes and similar tastes. So inevitably, and the same with your best friend, you are going to sometimes turn up wearing the same outfit or very similar. There's a couple of friends that we go out with, a male and a female couple, and the two men, they never confer. They're not those type of men, but they often have got a very similar shirt on and very similar trousers, and we all get on really well. And we've got similar tastes, we've got similar likes, similar dislikes. So you do end up sometimes having this mimicry that you don't intend to do, but it does just happen because we relate to the same things.
Very interesting. This has really opened up like different connections with different things that I've learned in my mind. So this is
good.
This is great. So say someone were to go on a job interview and they want to make a great first impression.
Yeah.
Whether it be seated at a table or standing up with the person who's taking the interview, what are the most common mistakes that people make?
Going into a job interview?
Yes.
And the biggest mistake is being really, really nervous, but not telling the other people that they are nervous. Because once you do that, as I said earlier, you will relax and they will relax and you've got their empathy because you've been vulnerable. So trying to bluff it if they're really nervous and just going in and trying to act confidently can often come off quite badly. The biggest mistakes people make in job interviews are also not giving enough eye contact. It looks shifty. We don't trust people when they don't give us good eye contact. And just not sitting upright. I often see, I do some coaching for people who are going into job interviews for a charity. I do one day a month. And they think it doesn't matter how they turn up with their clothes. Oh, it's not a formal job, so I don't need to turn up. Yeah, you do, because you want to create that impression. So, how you turn up with your body language, how you've dressed, how you've done your hair, if it's makeup, if someone's wearing makeup, the jewelry, everything about you is giving a message. You think, oh, I'll just wear my trainers because it doesn't matter. Okay, it might not matter for the job role that you're going for, but is that the impression? Unless the interviewers have said to you, come really casual, I would probably go more than casual because you're sending an impression. And is it the impression you want to send? Clean shoes, even if you go trainers, are they clean? Are they as clean as they could be? That costs nothing to put some water on them, make sure they're clean, because every little bit of you is being analysed, really, because we do it automatically as humans. So thinking about your body language. Am I sitting upright? Have I got my hands neat in front of me? Or am I fidgeting? Have I got a pen in my pocket? Am I fidgeting? All of those things, we are making assumptions about people.
Yeah, I mean, I've noticed this recently, at least, about how we present ourselves in person and the way that we think we're perceived by other people. There's the rise of, especially amongst Gen Z, the rise of looks maxing, and you have people trying to look as well as good as possible. It's mostly for the dating scene more than job interviews. But yeah, it's I think people have become more aware of the fact that the way that you look is like a digital, not a digital, physical CV of who you are as a person. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, but I think as we've spoken about, I think the main problem is that we've decided that we need to look good, we need to have the right clothes, have the right trimming of the beard or the hair. But how do we use our limbs and our face as a way to signal to other people that we're enjoying being around them is something that a lot of people struggle with. So
Yes.
yeah.
I also think about the clothes we wear. If you're going to a job interview and you've got a new suit on or a new pair of trousers and a smart shirt on, but you're really uncomfortable, it's not worth wearing them because your body language will give the wrong message. I do a lot of public speaking. So I'll turn up to an event and I'm on stage of sometimes 50 people, sometimes 500 people. I will never wear an outfit that I haven't already road tested in somewhere.
Okay.
Because if I've put a dress on or a suit on or a pair of trousers on that I'm not fully comfortable in, my body language won't be comfortable either. So I will send out completely the wrong message. So I road test everything. If I'm wearing a new dress, it will have already been worn for something else so that I know, how that dress sits on me. Do I feel suddenly uncomfortable because it's showing the roll of fat around my middle? Not that I've got one, to be fair, but if it did, do I then suddenly feel uncomfortable? Because that's going to show my body language. And I'm not going to say, oh, it's my dress that's making me feel awkward. I'm just going to feel awkward and it will show somehow. So, if you turn up to a job interview, road test your outfit first to make sure can you sit down comfortably in the trousers? Are you comfortable? I see so many people sit down and then they start pulling at the trousers. Not really comfortable. They put them on for the first time. They're not really comfortable. So instantly they look really uncomfortable. But the interviewer isn't thinking, oh, those trousers are uncomfortable. They're just thinking, this person is uncomfortable. So when we're looks maxing, think about, make sure it is something that you feel confident in.
Okay. I mean, you'll see a lot of people will take that point into account because some people will just go and rent a suit out and rent some shoes out just for the singular job interview or the 5 job interviews that they have planned. And then they'll find that they may not even get the first few because they're just fidgeting with their clothes at the start.
Yeah.
I mean, I've noticed this as well, especially through casual conversation, I might not assume that, this person is wearing uncomfortable clothing, but you'd think that they're a fairly unconfident person because they're doing XYZ with their clothing. I mean, you see it a fair amount as well. Say, for example, in the gym, when someone who's not in the physical space that they want to be, in terms of their body, you'll see them tugging on their shirt or tugging on their trousers, wherever it is. It signals on them being nervous or uncomfortable or insecure about the way that they look.
Yeah, totally. Exactly that.
Okay. I'm interested in the kind of body language that liars portray.
Okay.
So how can I tell if someone is lying?
So there is no one size fits all or one behavior that someone is lying. I'm probably slightly better than Chance at detecting a liar.
Okay.
Because on the whole, if you haven't got a baseline of someone's normal behavior, what normally happens when someone is lying is they'll change from their normal behavior. If they're not, if they're a con man, I would probably never pick up a con man because they're so good at their behavior that fits with that image. It's really hard to pick up on. But if it's just somebody around you and they're telling a lie, watch for the changes from their normal behavior. So if they're normally a fidgeter and then they stop fidgeting when they say something, that might be a clue. Or if they never fidget and then they start telling you something and you think, not sure this is true, and they start fidgeting, they might be telling a lie. but blink rate often goes up. The way the polygraph does the lie detector stuff, the way that works is it doesn't actually look for truth or lies. It looks for stress levels. And what the polygraph works on is when someone's stress level goes up, that's when there's more chance of a lie. So the signs of stress are blink rate increases significantly, searching for the right words rather than the truth. Oftentimes they'll do this with their face. So that isn't only disgust, dislike, disapproval, it can also be disbelief. So when someone says something that they don't fully believe in, might do that. Another sign is often the one-sided shoulder shrug. So not the double. The double is, I don't know. When someone does that and it's in time with their words, they really don't know. But when someone says, yeah, I'll be there on Friday night, and the shoulder goes, they're probably not going to be there. Their body is just giving away leakage that they really don't want to do that. So those are some of the signs you can look for from a body language perspective.
Okay. I remember seeing something about someone saying that like grabbing your neck is a sign of lying.
It's not a sign of lying. It's a sign of high stress potentially. So the neck is one of the most vulnerable parts of the body.
Yeah.
And we protect our neck when we're feeling vulnerable. So it's not a sign of lying. Definitely not. But it is a sign that stress levels have gone up. You know, if I'm telling the truth, why do I need to protect my neck? Why am I suddenly feeling vulnerable?
Okay.
And touching the face as well is another sign of stress. Yeah, the more someone touches the face, the more stressed they likely are.
Okay.
But it's not a sign of lying per se.
All right. Okay. So this is probably a reason why some polygraph lie detectors are obviously not 100% accurate, but say you were to put someone on a lie detector and they have been previously fairly stressed, or they're stressed by being on the lie detector itself, they might not even be someone who's lying.
Yeah.
Could that mess with the data for the actual detection?
Absolutely. It's called Othello's error. It's actually given a name for that. For the person who's innocent but worries about feeling guilty, starts to show the signs of guilt. And that's called Othello's error. I get it. When I go through an airport, I've got nothing dodgy on me. I've done nothing dodgy, but I feel guilty when I go through security, as if I've done something wrong. And that's that Othello's error, because then I might start to act guilty, or, you know, might show signs of fear, even though I've got nothing to be fearful of. So sometimes, I know I'm doing some training soon for border control to help them go beyond like Othello's error and actually look for signs of real guilty behaviour, not just this, oh, I feel guilty just because I'm not guilty, but I feel guilty just because I'm in this high stress situation.
Yeah, I mean, I've actually had this kind of fellows error thing happen. This was back in primary school, but I still remember it fairly vividly. So this teacher came in. I was in like year 6 at the time, and they had like massive detention slips, big red A4 sheets to signal that you have got a detention. And my parents were incredibly strict back then as well. So they came into my classroom. They were like, "We need you to come over. We need to talk to you." They were like, "Someone reported you putting up the middle finger outside, and we're gonna have to give you a detention for it." And I was just like, I'm this little kid who hasn't done anything like this at all. I didn't do anything. I was with my friends the entire time. You can go ask my friends. And then my friends told them that I wasn't doing anything. So they took me into the office and they sat me in the chair. I'm like, they're bawling tears down my face. And the teacher who got it reported came into the room and was just like, "This isn't the kid." But like all other teachers had thought it was me, because the typical reaction at a kid that age when something bad happens is that they start crying.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
there's a fellow's error, I guess, in that sort of scenario.
Yeah. And it's hard to get rid of, actually. You know, all my knowledge and all my experience, I can't get rid of it.
Yeah, it also happens as well with the lying thing. Like, people start laughing when they get caught out on a lie, right? But they might just laugh because they've been confronted about something.
Because they're nervous.
Exactly. So it becomes a little more difficult to tell if someone's a liar or not. But
I always say, with lies and truth, actually don't look for lies and truth. Look for signs of comfort and discomfort. Comfort and discomfort is a lot more reliable indicators. When we start looking for truth and lies, depending on what our view of the world is, it will lead us down a certain path. Whereas if you look for signs of comfort and look for signs of discomfort, we're all much better at judging that, no matter what our view of the world. So that's a more reliable way of trying to understand what's going on. And if someone is really uncomfortable, but they say they're telling the truth, but they're not showing signs of comfort, that to me is a big red flag. Okay, so why are you not comfortable? What is it? What's going on? You give them the opportunity to tell you more. But look for signs of comfort and discomfort rather than truth and lies, because it's much more reliable.
Do liars add extra detail in their stories?
Sometimes, yes. The really good liars get it just right. But bad liars often add far too much detail. They'll often talk in a different tense. So when someone is telling the truth, they'll say, "Oh, and I did this, and I did this, and I did this." When someone is telling a lie, they'll talk in a much more stage way, like, "I went through the door and I did this." So it's more like if you're telling the truth, "Yeah, I went through the door and up the stairs," and there's no sort of extra detail. But when someone's telling a lie, "I went through the door, I walked up 4 steps, the carpet was really blue and really fluffy." They'll add all this extra detail because they think they're making you believe it, but actually, I believe the first one.
Yeah.
Much more.
What are the connections between pronouns and someone telling a lie? Because I remember reading on, to just make this a bit more understandable, I remember reading on and about this sort of thing, and they were saying that liars tend to, they tend to not reference I so much because they want to distance themselves from the story that they're telling. How much truth is there to that?
Yeah, that's completely true. I mean, there's a whole field on interrogation techniques and negotiation techniques about how people say certain things, but that is definitely true. When they're telling the lie, they don't make it personal because they are trying to keep themselves out of it. And the really good liars will often use 80 to 85% of the truth and just add in a bit of the lie, because that makes it easier to get away with. When there's just that, they stick to the truth as far as possible and then insert the lie just a little bit of somewhere in that. Makes it really hard to spot it.
I see, I understand. All right. Sorry, I keep looking over here. I have like all my questions and notes, so
I got that.
all right. What is the sort of body language that someone who is trying to manipulate you does?
They'll often hold your eye contact longer than normal, and because they're looking to sort of pin you with their eyes, if to say, "You do believe me, don't you? You do believe me." And they'll often be really intense about that. What other stuff do they do? They're looking for your reactions with the intense eye staring, almost like they won't let you look away until they get affirmation that you've believed them. That can be quite a giveaway when someone has to keep that eye contact and you feel like it's a bit more than normal and makes me feel a bit uncomfortable. What else do they do? They'll often give away what we call duper's delight, which is a smile that is, "I know something that you don't know." And it's kind of like, I'm not very good at doing it on purpose, this one, but it's kind of like there's kind of a knowingness about this smile, and it's not really enjoyment, apart from the enjoyment of, "I know more than you know."
I see.
So they're taking some pleasure in the fact that they're getting one over you. That often makes an appearance.
Okay. So it's more of a, I literally can't even imagine doing it, but I can have a grasp of kind of facial expression that they'd be doing in that scenario. Okay. Would there be any difference in the sort of speech they'd be using in order to, I guess, gaslight you into believing what they're trying to tell you?
They'll often try and make out that you're the idiot. Like, well, why wouldn't you believe me? And someone who says, to be truthful, they'll often start with, and I'm being honest. I mean, someone who is truthful and honest never needs to say that. It's like a rider that just doesn't need to be said. And when someone says something as well that's not entirely truthful, they'll often add the word really in it. So not when you say, oh, it's really cold. I don't mean that. What I mean is, oh yeah, I did that last Tuesday. Really? When that really makes an addition to a sentence that doesn't quite make sense, whatever was said before it probably didn't quite happen as I just said.
Okay. Okay, all right. So,
and that tells me you're feeling quite overwhelmed, Vansh.
Yeah, I mean, that is a pretty accurate point
I'm
on it.
quite good at what I do.
Yeah, I can tell. Well, if someone takes in the stuff that we've talked about today, and they were doing most of the right things, they're smiling in a social environment, they're trying to come across a bit more confident. What are still the subtle things that we can notice to tell if someone is uncomfortable, and maybe we can call that out and try to make them a bit more comfortable in the situation?
I mean, calling someone out never makes them comfortable, to be honest.
Okay, so what should we do?
I would reassure them. So that I was just going to say to you then, you might be feeling a bit overwhelmed, but this is probably going to be a really good, interesting segment for people to pay attention to. So that way I'm reassuring you that actually, yeah, you might be feeling a bit overwhelmed and I've given you loads of information, but it's okay. It's all right. It's actually going to make it really interesting for people. And they can always watch it 2 or 3 times to make sure that they don't miss anything, as can you. So I often, to make people more comfortable, I'll reassure them. And just sort of show empathy. One of the best things we can do as human beings, particularly as we're more online than ever before and with AI, what we really need is basic human interactions and kindness. So showing and just noticing how other people feel, like saying, oh, you don't seem very confident about that, or you don't seem entirely comfortable. Is everything okay with you? Just those kind questions or kind comments can do a real lot of good, actually, to help people just navigate their way through what can be tough times for them.
Okay. If I am to, say, get in a disagreement with someone, whether it be your partner or a good friend, what are some things that you can do to try bring down the heat in that conversation, whether that be body language or the way that you say things?
Yeah.
What are some things that we can do to bring down heat?
I mean, take a step back. If it's an in-person disagreement, take a slight step back, a literal slight step back, because it gives people space. That will often de-escalate a lot of situations, because we can come across, particularly if we're really passionate about something and it's a disagreement, we can come across as quite aggressive. And all that does is make the heat get higher and more aggressive and more intense. Whereas if you take a little step back, it kind of takes the pressure off a little bit. What was the question again? Something about how do we help with...
How do we bring the heat down in the conversation, disagreements?
That little step back. And you can just say things like, I wouldn't say, oh, well, I can see you're really angry now. I'd say something like, I'm sorry, I can see you're really upset about that. You're not saying, I'm sorry I've caused it. You just said, I'm sorry, I can see you're really upset about that. Or I can hear that's really troubling for you. Or I can see that's really troubled you. What that does is takes the heat out again, because you're not calling them out in an unkind way and you're not heating the whole thing up. You're seeing how they're reacting and you're offering it back to them in a way that's non-confrontational, actually.
So I guess getting better at figuring out, if it's with your partner, I think it can be a bit easier in that sense.
Yeah,
so
say things like, I just felt that was uncomfortable for you, because you're saying, I just felt. And they can say, no, actually, I just felt that was really uncomfortable for you. I just felt and be honest about how this interaction has made you feel in a non-confrontational way. You're not blaming them or shaming them in any way. You're taking a bit of ownership, actually, and accountability for yourself and how it impacted you. And then they can say to you, well, actually, I didn't mean it like that. I meant this, this, and this, and this. But what you haven't done is created a lot of uproar by owning it yourself. You've actually de-escalated it.
Okay. When you say you've done a few talks of your own, when you go on stage, what are some of your cues to ensure that you come across as someone to be listened to? And my question for this is, if you're focusing so much on the cues that you should do to make sure that people are listening to you, don't you think that would take away a little bit from the level of confidence and seamlessness you have in a conversation or when you're presenting on stage?
So there's a couple of things there. I do a lot of presenting on stage. The most important thing for anyone, and I teach presentation training to people, the most important thing is to feel confident yourself and really feel confident. So be aware of your own body language. So if people don't really film themselves speaking, but get someone to film you in a real scenario, and so you can see what you do under pressure, because we often don't know what we do. And the other thing I teach is start with a really strong sentence. Don't ever start with, "My name's Adrianne and I'm here to talk to you today about body language," because that is a load of crap. One of my favourite sentences to start with is, "You cannot not communicate. Whether you realise it or not, we are all communicating something all of the time." And then I do those deliberate pauses, because what I do is I slow myself down. I give the audience time to process what I've just said, because I always start with a strong sentence. And once that first sentence is out of the way, I'm away. And people who are nervous public speakers, once they get that first sentence done, they nail that first sentence, they then go off swimmingly. Because that first sentence is your setting the tone, setting the scene. And if you do it with strong presence and an interesting sentence, it can be a stat, it can be a figure, it can be anything at all that's appropriate to your audience. When you start in such a strong way, you've got their focused attention, which feeds the speaker. If I think, I can see they're really interested in that. Great, I'm off. But preparation is the key. And I have 3 Ps. There are preparation, have a purpose, so know what your intention is, but we're not going for perfection. Because when we strive for perfection, we often get very derailed. So when you're speaking to an audience, don't aim for perfection. Be prepared, have a purpose, but don't go for perfect, because you put yourself under too much pressure.
Do you have a sort of pre-show warm-up routine or something to get you hyped before getting on stage?
I mean, to be fair, I don't go in front of any audiences that aren't normally business, so I don't normally need to be hyped. I do check my own body language. So if it's a big gig and it's an audience I really care about and I'm being paid a lot of money, then I just check in with myself and make sure that I feel confident. And I've got a little bit of a process that if I'm feeling overly anxious or nervous, I would allow that feeling to be there for half an hour before. I'll just check in with myself. Am I feeling nervous? Yeah, a bit nervous, like I feel it in my stomach. Okay, well, I'm just going to pay attention to that for a few minutes. I'm just going to let that be there. And then that feeling will go away. And then you think, I don't feel nervous anymore. I mean, a little bit of nerves is always very useful because it does make sure you perform really well. But it wouldn't be useful if it was overpowering and I couldn't get my words out to say my strong sentence. So that process, I call it the letting go process. It's the process where I just check in and make sure the emotions I'm holding in my body in that moment are useful and not unuseful to me.
Okay. All right. Because I wonder, say there's someone, I mean, I've done my fair amount of public speaking here and there, and the one thing that I've done is convince myself that my nervousness is just excitement, and that helps me get my words out on stage.
And genuinely is as well.
Yeah, most of the time.
Yeah.
sometimes that doesn't work for people.
Mhm.
What is something else that they can do as like a reframe?
So breathing exercises. When we are really nervous and we can't get out of our heads into excitement, what happens, the first thing to go is our breath. It becomes very shallow. So intentionally, I think the one I use the most is what I think it's called box breathing. So intake of 4, hold for 4, let go for 4. And that just calms the nervous system down. But breathing, people often forget to do when they're really nervous. And then they get on the stage and they've maybe walked up a few steps to get onto the stage, and all of a sudden, it's like they've run a marathon before they've got on the stage. But actually that breathing, if you can just get that breathing under control before you start to talk. And the other thing I always do is pause. When I get onto the stage, I did a TEDx talk in March. I don't know if you've seen it, but I'll send the link if anybody wants to watch it. And the first thing I do when I get onto that red dot is I just stop for a minute. And you can see me stop and just pause. And then I start talking. Once I've got my breath back, I've walked on. The worst thing you can do is just start with that breathy, because you I sound really nervous, and it comes out very nervous. So just get your breathing under control, I think, is really important.
One thing I've noticed from this conversation and what I've seen of your work, you don't use many filler words when you're speaking. A lot of people do. What are some things that help to become more articulate?
I mean, I did used to use up a lot of filler words. I think it's practice and knowing my topic really well. Like, I would never talk about a topic that I don't know really well, because I wouldn't come across as confident talking about that. So I think I allow myself to pause too. Like just then, I slowed myself right down. And people don't allow themselves a pause. The filler words come in when they actually just need a pause.
Okay. I found out why people use filler words. I may be wrong, and maybe you can provide some insight on this. But the reason that I found people use filler words is mostly because the experiences that they had, at least growing up, when they were having conversations, is that when they did take a pause, other people would butt into the conversation and take lead of that conversation, and then the topic that you were talking about gets kind of left behind. So people use filler words like the ers and the extended ands to make sure other people know that, hey, I still have an idea, I'm still talking. But then that can also come across as really, less powerful in your own speech.
Yeah. And I always say to people, if that happens, that if they're worried about that happening, it's a big fear a lot of people have, is like, if I don't keep that going, people will take over and I hadn't said what I needed to say. The best way to handle that, I've found, is if that does happen, jump back in and just say, I'll just take you back to what I was just talking about, because I just want to finish that thread. So taking ownership of it proactively instead of getting cross because someone has took over. What that will do is, to the person that's done that, they perhaps haven't realised, they perhaps haven't done it on purpose, they've just got excited and want to carry on with whatever was on their mind. It reminds them that actually they've been a little bit rude, but it also gives the person that does it is a kind way of just taking back control, so that they don't get home and think, oh, that happened again. And they get really annoyed with themselves, like, why can't I not just keep a conversation going? So rather than blame yourself, just, take a bit of control back and say, I'm just going to finish that, because it's going to really bug me if I don't just finish that thread, and go on with the thread.
Right, so taking ownership of the conversation and being confident that what you have to say, I guess, is worth the conversation. Most of the time it is. Like, everyone's input is worth something.
Absolutely.
It's important to know that. When I am speaking to someone, or in your case, speaking to massive audiences, or speaking to a camera, trying to get a point across, what are some things I can do with my hands? And it's one thing I've been thinking about recently as well, where things I can do with my mouth or with my eyebrows and with my hands to try bring a point across a bit more powerfully and a bit more dramatically. So instead of people listening to the point that I have to say, maybe it's something interesting, instead of thinking, oh, that's interesting, they go, oh, that's really interesting. Because I feel like there's your body language and the way that you use your mouth and your eyebrows can really be the distance between those two.
So you're doing it very naturally there. I've just seen your hands and you are gesticulating. You said eyebrows and mouth, and your hands went to those parts. That is all I do. I don't do anything else than that. I literally just allow my gestures to shine through. A lot of people don't let their gestures, natural gesturing, come through because they think, oh, it feels awkward, it feels uncomfortable, or, do people know what I'm doing, or do they think I'm being a bit off? Just let those natural gestures come through. I don't do anything more than that. I don't ever try to regulate my facial expressions or regulate my behaviour in any way unless I think it's not going to be useful. So I don't ever present up here. Hands are never up here and they're never below my waist, because this is the ideal, sort of that square is the ideal place to gesture in. But apart from that, I don't do anything else. I try and keep them in that box just because it looks neater and it's not too distracting for the audience. But when I have tried to do something that doesn't feel natural, it never comes across well. So I just let my natural gesturing, so I'm doing it now, you can't see it, natural gesturing, take over.
Yeah, I can imagine it would be a great thing for people to stop giving themselves restrictions, especially when they're speaking, with their hand gestures, or especially, and giving themselves pauses. I think, I wonder what someone could do to bring back that sort of non-restrictive hand gesturing and speaking, because a lot of people will give themselves those restrictions over a long period of time, where then the lack of hand gestures, the slumped over body language, the quiet talking becomes their normal.
Yes.
So how do we get back to that baseline?
Practice and just feeling really comfortable. There is no magic bullet. It is just practice. I've spoken at the opening of an envelope over the last 10 years because I want to practice to get really good at speaking on a stage. And the only way I've done it is practice. And by watching back footage of myself, thinking, okay, I've never really done anything that I've had to change too much, but I've seen other speakers where they jiggle their change in their pocket. Well, that's just a really simple fix. If you know you're going to do that and there's no use of it to do, take the change out of your pocket before you get on the stage, because then you can't do it. So it's being really practical, understanding what you do in your behaviour when you might be feeling a bit stressed. And then if there are things that you can help yourself to go around that behaviour. Some people pace a lot. I've never been really a pacer, but put in a square of carpet and practice delivering on a square of carpet keeps you in that box. It will stop you pacing. So doing things that help retrain your behaviour works really well.
Very interesting. So help put yourself in a box to stop pacing, or being, I guess in this kind of situation, awareness is power. Like knowledge is power. So being aware of the things and the little ticks that you have.
Yeah.
And then intentionality, being intentional about taking those things out of practice.
Yeah. That's exactly it.
Okay. How important is preparation?
Massive. I think I can speak, we haven't prepared for this today, but I've done lots of podcasts, but so I'm prepared. But if this was my very first podcast, this would be a very different Adrianne sat in front of you, because I've not practiced it, but I've been asked these questions a lot. So as you can tell, I've got an opinion on practicing it.
Yeah.
But when I first started speaking 10 years ago, I wasn't this confident and couldn't have just turned up, but I've practiced a lot. So practice is really important, I think. If you turn up to something and you haven't practiced a lot or done years worth of work up to it, I can literally turn up practically anywhere and just speak because I've done so much practicing of it.
Very impressive.
So practicing is really important.
Okay. I had a question and I've completely lost my train of thought, honestly, but it's all good. Oh my God, sorry. I can't really think of a question right now.
That's okay.
And let me go through these here.
Do you want a top tip to end with?
I usually end the conversations with if this podcast were the last thing that you ever did, what's a piece of advice that you would leave with the world? What do you want people to remember about you?
To remember about me, or if there was the last podcast, I can't even speak. You're gonna have to edit this a little bit. If this was the last podcast I ever did, I'd want people to remember that actually true authenticity and confidence is really empowering for yourself and really engaging for other people to see. So, how you feel inside will always show on the outside. So if you're not as confident as you'd like to be, do take the steps to become more confident truly. And I'm not talking about arrogance. I'm just talking about true confidence on whatever topic is important to you. People remember that, people engage with that, and it sticks with people.
I guess that's a question in itself, though. Yeah, speaking about something that you're confident in means that you can bring across a point more efficiently.
Yeah.
But I guess, say for example, for my podcast, it's not very a singular topic based. It's more of jack of all trades kind of thing, where I'm learning about different topics of life. I want to get my point across powerfully to an audience, but I'm not exactly 100% the best in that specific topic area, and I don't want to come across with so much conviction that I'm driving a stake so hard into the ground that it's impossible to pull back out.
Yeah.
So what are some things that I could do to get my point across powerfully, but not enough so that I'm acting like a know-it-all?
And I mean, I think the way you've just said that is absolutely perfect, because that's really engaging. You just said something there that actually I want to hear more about that, because that was said with genuine authority and authenticity. You know, I want to get my point across powerfully, but I don't want to drive a stake into the ground that means I come across as a know-it-all. That's really engaging. So we're all changing, we're all learning, we're all growing. And I think if you are open like you've just been and just say, this is how I feel about this subject and this is the stuff I've learned about it, I'm always open to other ideas and other points of view. So if you've got a different one to me, tell me. But from what I know so far, this is where I stand on this topic. That's really engaging, actually. That's a really powerful way of what you want to achieve.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's all I've got. That's all the questions I've had.
Great.
And they've all been answered fairly well. So thank you for being on, Adrianne. This has been an incredible conversation. I have learned a lot from you. And where can people go to see what you're up to?
So I put lots of little videos on TikTok. So my username on TikTok is Adrianne Body Language. I'm on LinkedIn. That's my other most prolific way of getting hold of me. So LinkedIn I post most days, and YouTube Shorts, obviously, which is just Adrianne Carter, and Instagram, which is Adrianne Carter. So on most platforms, I've got some sort of presence.
All right. Thank you, Adrianne.